Okay. Well, I don't have any very uninteresting stories today like I usually come up with. I thought for sure I would be coming in saying, well, we got a little oats planted here a month ahead of time, but decided not to do that. So it's probably a good thing. But my grandfather always, when oats were coming up and it snowed, the term was white manure because it actually brings nitrogen out of the air and puts it on the ground. So that's that. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. I call the meeting to order of the Dunn County Aging Disability Resource Center. We're the advisory committee, and we're have a couple of folks that aren't here today, but I think we're all set up to do business. So, anything from the public or speaking or received?
There's nothing that's been submitted or online.
Okay. Well,
I want to make an announcement for everybody. You're welcome to come to a meeting on Wednesday, March 27th at the Rossback Museum. Chippewa Valley Learning and Retirement is having a program on long-term care issues in Western Wisconsin. And we have invited and received a positive response from Representatives Clint Moses, and Representative Rob Sommerfeld, and Senator Jeff Smith. And so they're going to be talking about long-term care issues in Western Wisconsin. And I think that there's some issues with the healthcare center not being fully opened because they don't have enough CNAs and to operate. And they also, there's a number of nursing homes in Western Wisconsin that have closed. And so what we want to hear from the state, and Clint Moses is the chairperson of the long-term care committee or the health committee at the state level, so that we want to hear what the state's going to, how the state can be involved. And there's going to be time for questions too. I know the issue of the hospital is and the clinics is an issue. But we're not going to, that's not the focus. Although if people ask questions, they could answer, and they could address them if they want to. But our main focus is dealing with long-term care issues in Western Wisconsin. So you're all invited to come. If you come, even though you didn't sign up for the class, you just sign your name that you're there, and so that we have an idea of who's coming. So, and it's at 10 o'clock in the morning from 10 to 11:30 on the 27th, Wednesday, the 27th. And if you want to, Tracy, if you want to invite your staff to come, if any of them are available, that would be fine.
So it's open to the public?
Well, I've made it's not generally open to the public. The Chippewa Valley Learning and Retirement, usually you have to sign up. But I've asked that if people can just come, and they said yes. So
One more question. Does that also address at-home care, or is the focus mostly institutional care?
no, it's also dealing with the lack of, there are a number of healthcare agencies in we haven't defined it exactly, and I need to do this for the speakers, but there's a number of healthcare agencies in Western Wisconsin, but they don't always have enough workers to actually do the in-home care. And I think that's part of the issue.
Right.
So it's not just in nursing homes, but it's and assisted living facilities.
Thank you.
And okay.
Well, I don't need assisted living yet, but I do need assisted remembrance and we should get a motion for the last January meeting. So, with Dave sitting here, former chairman of the county board, I don't feel the pressure, but I feel the pressure. See, there we go. So can I have a motion for the
minutes is printed.
Thank you, David. Is there a second? Okay, any corrections? That's correct. And we got a second from Chris. So any other corrections or discussion on the January meeting? I can't believe we have gone all of January. Here we are in March. That's something. So, not that I got a birthday coming up or anything, but I just know that, never mind. People have been really nice to me for some reason. I don't know. Well, no, I had a big grandkids weekend with lots of hockey, and I usually they're so busy being kids they hardly notice old grandpa's there, and this weekend for some reason they did.
Oh.
It's nice. If you got grandkids, So okay, enough of that for Larry, but we had a really nice weekend coming up, or last weekend. Any other public comment or any other discussion?
Need to have it approved.
Oh, did we? Oh, yeah, motion to approve. Okay, we got the motion, got the second. All signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Now we can talk anything else. I guess Tracy, is your time kind of now?
It is kind of, yep,
Okay.
it's the Tracy show now, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm the only speaker today. So, I just wanted to give a couple of updates on things that I consider to be very good news, really, but, we haven't necessarily talked about them before because things weren't really finalized. So last year, actually from 2022, really, when I started all the way through the legislative cycle last year, there was a lot of advocacy going on for ADRCs through I always say kind of our parent organization, but the organization that oversees ADRCs at the state level is called the Bureau of Aging and Disability Resources. And we did a lot of advocacy in terms of different funding requests from the legislatures. I went with Paula, as a matter of fact, once to Madison and met with several of our legislatures and talked about our needs. So the good news was we did find out in July when the state legislature passed the budget that for the first time in 25 years, ADRCs had been given additional base funding. So in the past 25 years, ADRCs have gotten some additional funding, but it was always tied to a specific project. This is just our base rate funding increase. So the ask that Bader had was around 10 million, and we got less than half of that, but still considered a big win in terms of just getting an increase at all. At the end of November, Bader let each ADRC know throughout the state how things shook out in terms of how that was going to affect each county. And there was kind of a very complicated process in how they determined what counties were getting additional funding. Long story short, we did get additional funding in Dunn County to the tune of about $70,000 per year in additional base rate funding. So that was very, very exciting. And I felt very fortunate because there were actually some counties that were held constant. They didn't get funding increases, and there are even a few that will stand to lose some funding over the next 2 years, simply because a little bit of a history about ADRCs is that ADRCs started as a pilot project, and the initial counties that signed on to the pilot project 25 years ago were considered Generation 1 ADRCs. Then they kind of expanded to an additional group of ADRCs after that first pilot project was found to be successful. And those were Generation 2 ADRCs. Finally, the state expanded ADRCs throughout the balance of the state, and the rest of the ADRCs who were in that third expansion were Generation 3 ADRCs. Dunn County was a Generation 3 ADRC, so our county was amongst the last group to sign on to the ADRC state process. So with lots of, I'm not exactly sure what happened 25 years ago, but what happened was that those ADRCs who were Generation 1 ADRCs had a level of funding based on that pilot project. And they negotiated with the state to be able to keep their funding at that level. And then when Generation 2 came along, there was some additional funding, but it was at a lesser rate than Generation 1's. And then finally, when the project expanded across the balance of the state, the Generation 3's had a lesser amount yet. So Bader, I think that the thought was no one thought that it would go 25 years without an increase in base rate funding, but that is what indeed happened. So Bader took many factors into consideration, but basically has eliminated the generations of ADRCs to try to make things more equal. And that's why some ADRCs are not getting an increase in funding and some are actually potentially could lose some funding at the end of this 2-year process. But again, what? Okay, hold on. I better record again. Sorry, folks. I was just getting on the roll of it too.
Yeah.
The way it always goes. Okay. Okay, recording has started. Okay, so we should be good. So I think that I'm sure that the ADRCs who are losing funding are not incredibly happy, but I think that they all recognize that this is fair and equitable because one county shouldn't be getting more funding based on what decisions that were made by decision makers 25 years ago, all those sorts of things. So this is very good news. In Dunn County, myself, Paula, a small group of us kind of looked at the funding and we looked at what we wanted to do with the funding. I do have to, each county has to provide a report in November to Bader about how we're utilizing the funding or how we plan to utilize the funding. So many counties are adding staff, doing things like that. I looked at our numbers and our staffing levels. And at this point, I didn't feel that there was a need to add particular staff members. I feel we're pretty right sized at the moment based on statistically, the work that workers have had in each of their roles have been staying pretty consistent over the last 5 years. There's some fluctuation, but it's been fairly consistent. So I didn't feel there was a need to add a position, like for example, of our intake and assistance folks or any other particular programs. What I really wanted to take the opportunity to look at was ways that we can increase programming for folks who utilize the ADRC. So one of the things that we've decided to do, we had a part-time person, her name is Casey Schnacky, and she does our caregiver programs. So she works with folks who are providing care to either their some form of loved one, their spouse, their sibling, their children. There's also a small program for grandparents that are caring for grandchildren. She is a wonderful asset to our community, but her position was part-time. And so we've actually made that position a full-time position, and she's expanding both. The goal is to expand that caregiver programming, which is becoming more and more necessary, as well as an area that in Dunn County has kind of fallen off considerably since the pandemic, and it's what we call our evidence-based health promotion services. So there are programs that we can do in the community that are supported by the ADRC, where we are actually offering, we offer educational or physical type programming. There's like a Strong Bones program. There's a Walk with Ease program. There's a new one that we're really looking into called Bingo Size, where it's a bingo game, but it has exercise elements into it. And it really can be held anywhere. We do them a lot in senior centers. But what we really like about those programs is I call them kind of the fun things that get people connected up with the ADRC. And I'm a strong proponent of the saying that it's great if people know us before they need us, if they have some idea of what the ADRC is and the services we provide before they're in a crisis. And these sort of programs are the ones that draw people into the ADRC so they at least get some knowledge and information and some knowledge of our staff, so that maybe they make connections with us before they're in a crisis and their parent is, in the hospital and needs to discharge and there's no facility for them to get to and they contact us in a panic because they need services, tomorrow. Unfortunately, that's just not the way these programs work. It takes more time. So it's great if we can get those folks coming in. The other thing that we really are excited about is really expanding where we have these services, still having them in Menominee, because obviously Menominee has our largest population, but we're really trying to do more outreach into the balance of the county, connecting with Boyceville, Colfax, Elk Mound, Wheeler, and trying to do some of these programs and draw people in other areas. So that is one part of how some of that funding will be used. The other part, which goes kind of hand in hand, is that we are hoping to make, I think we all know Bernie Allen, our nutrition coordinator here. We are looking to actually change his duties a bit. He will still be in charge of the nutrition program, but will also be what we call our aging and transportation services manager. So he will be kind of the head of the aging programs, which include nutrition, as well as those health promoting evidence-based practice exercise type programs that we're talking about. So he would actually be Casey's direct supervisor, and he would be heading up that 8521 transportation grant that we talk about every November here. He will be kind of taking over the lead role with that. With our last 5-year plan in that transportation program, we agreed to have a quarterly meeting of folks who are interested in Dunn County and issues related to transportation, and trying to reach more folks in the community that have concerns related to transportation services that are provided for adults with disabilities or seniors. And so that will be part of his duties, is to coordinate that quarterly meeting, as well as, like I said, head up that grant every year. So that Bernie's position, because it is such a change, that will be going in front of the county board as a position change on the wage grid, just because I did not feel that it was appropriate to just add these duties to Bernie without some sort of compensation. Bernie is already a full-time employee, so that is actually fairly cost effective, and the costs for both of these changes are fully covered by the increase in the grant. So that's really exciting. And like I said, our other goal in the transportation realm is we also really are very interested in working more closely with the transit department here, Austin, who heads that up, with actually trying to provide some transportation services in the balance of the county instead of just primarily within Menominee. I know that's been tried in the past. I've had several people said, well, we tried it in the past and it didn't work, but I think it's time to try it again. And, we're talking about maybe just starting out with a monthly trip. Like, we will have go to Boyceville, and anyone who wants to get on the bus, you pay the $3 bus fee and we'll take you to Walmart and, like a little shopping trip around town, just to get people who interested in riding the bus and seeing, if they like it and if they want to do that, and hoping to grow those sorts of programs. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And I think that it's something that would be a really positive use of that 8521 grant money for folks who are adults with disabilities or elders. what became quite evident when we did our 5-year plan with the State Department of Transportation is that it appeared that the greatest need really was outside the city of Menominee in terms of those services. And I just feel like it's time, although we're still concerned about COVID and all those sorts of things, a lot of those, precautions and such have kind of faded away. And so I think it's really time to be a little bit more assertive in terms of looking at some of that programming. So Bernie is excited about it. This will be coming up, that his position will have to be approved, and that will go through, I believe, the executive committee. Is that, I'm looking at Dave and Larry because they're going to be able to guide me a little better. It goes like through the executive committee, and then they approve it to be put on the full county board. So it's slated to be on the agenda for the executive committee this month, and then perhaps in April would be in front of the full board if it's something that moves through. Okay.
Week before.
Okay. All right. Well,
If they want.
yes, I know that Jenna Lee in HR is helping with getting that proposal ready. And so she was the one who kind of told me the time frame. So I mean, I just, but
They have to do their.
right. Yeah. And and she's working on a number of different things. So I'm just thinking that might be what worked best for her, type of a thing. But I'm really excited, and I'm thinking that this will be a way to really do some of the community engagement stuff that I'm really excited about. And it's been something that I've really wanted to do for a long time. The funding kind of came into play at a good time for us to be able to move forward with that, as well as I no longer supervise that adult protective services as I did before, which really took a lot of time and energy. So it's given me time and energy to focus on my ADRC work, and that's really exciting. So.
I have a few questions about that. One is that meaning Helen Bader Foundation? You said the Bader Fund.
Oh, no.
Bader.
Bader stands for the Bureau of Aging and Disability Resources.
Oh, okay.
It's
I
the
thought,
overall, yep, it's,
Okay.
I can see that. It's the overall agency at the state level that oversees ADRCs.
Okay,
It oversees numerous other,
so that's just an acronym
for
for
yeah,
that.
the
Okay.
Bureau,
I was
yes.
thinking, because I
Yep.
know Helen Bader Foundation funds a lot of aging
No.
programs, and that's the
Yep.
reason I thought that. The other is, you mentioned that some of the states that were like, or some of the counties that were like first and second levels, you said they actually lost money?
Some of them may. So when we got all the funding amounts, basically they're increasing the funding in a 2-year process. So like the way it worked with Dunn County is that they gave us all of our funding all at once. So we'll get that 70,000 each year going forward. Some counties, for whatever reason, get a certain amount this year and then a little bit of a different amount the second year. At this point, what Bader has told counties is those that were slated to potentially lose money would lose money after that second year. So they were going to be held harmless for 2 years in order so that they had so they had time to plan for this loss in funding. At our most recent meetings, what Bader explained is that their goal, although they can't guarantee it, is that those counties will continue to be held harmless. So they will stay at that level and not receive funding cuts. They're hoping for 2 things. One, that the state legislature may, in the next biennium, grant some more money. I will be honest, I don't know if I'm super hopeful, knowing that it took 25 years to get them to grant us money once. It would seem surprising to me that they would do it 2 cycles in a row. But Bader does typically have some funding, unspent funds every year, for various programs that are underspent. And so what they are explaining is that their intention would be using some of that underspent funds to try to support those counties and not actually have them undergo a cut. But there are no guarantees, and technically the plan that has been approved by them shows that those counties will receive some cuts.
So it sounds as though they're trying to even it out so that all the
Correct.
counties have
Right.
similar, can do similar programming and have similar amount of money.
Exactly,
for
yeah.
the-
And I mean,
okay.
there were lots of factors that went into this whole calculation, how they determine different things. if you were a rural county that was weighted heavier in terms of needing funding, population, obviously population of folks who are considered elders or those adults with disabilities. There were, I think, 7 different things that weighed into their calculation for how they made the final determination as to what the funding was going to be. But in general, ADRC wide, statewide, this is looked at as a very positive thing because even those who were Generation 1 ADRCs getting the highest level of funding agreed that that was a very unfair system. That just because 25 years ago they agreed to be a part of a pilot project and those initial, I think it was 11 counties, made some sort of an agreement at that time that that's the way it would stay. It doesn't, 25 years later, that just doesn't hold as fair. So,
More
So-
questions?
So now are all counties in Wisconsin, do they have ADRCs?
every county is served by an ADRC. There are some regional, like for
Yep.
example, Barron and Rusk are a regional county. Typically some smaller counties up north are, but every county is served by an ADRC and there has to be an ADRC office or satellite office in every county. And then all tribes are served by, have their own ADRCs as well.
Well, that's good news on
Yeah.
the transportation thing. And,
Yeah.
first of all, it's a great project to be able to help people come in, but also it's a great opportunity to provide information to people about what's going on.
Right.
And what's available and stuff like that. And, great. Dave,
Tracy, do you have any, you ever
here, Mike, you do the
work
mic.
with Barron County at all or anything?
I have a very good working relationship with Jennifer, who's the director of Barron County. Mhm.
They had vans instead of big vans. I'm
Mhm.
talking like a Chrysler van,
Sure.
where they went out into the outskirts of the county,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just Barron. And I was like, I don't remember the specifics, but at the time, it sounded like a real good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of floated it by our committee, but it didn't go anyplace. But you may want to ask them, this may be an opportunity to change the way we're doing it.
Right.
Doing things if you want to try to work out, because you're right. A few years ago, we did try running our big vans to
Mhm.
Colfax and Boyceville, and it didn't work out.
Right.
But maybe if we could have a smaller van, maybe that would work out.
I think, Dave, this is an opportunity for us to really look at lots of different options. And, every county uses those $8521, that specific transportation grant that we talk about every November differently. It's actually designed to be used pretty flexibly. We are very fortunate that our county has its own transit office, and traditionally the majority of the funding has been passed through to them and they do a great job. But even, Austin and I had been talking late last year about the desire to provide more services in the rest of the county besides just the city of Menominee. There's lots. I've talked with Eau Claire County. I'll make sure I connect with Jennifer because I know that I think they have their own employed drivers too, which is, not something that I think we're super interested in doing, seeing that we already have our own transit,
People.
Right, yeah, but some ADRCs actually have their own vehicles and drivers, and that's not probably the direction that I'm interested in going in. But I think in terms of providing options and talking with Austin about ways we could do this more creatively, I think this is the time to do that. So. Oh, and I will check with her, Dave, because like I said, every county does things quite differently and they're allowed to do that. Some people contract completely with a private company, like Chippewa County does all of theirs. There are private van services that they use, although they just found out at the end of last year that the cost of the rides were going up like 60% or something. I mean, just it was a huge jump based on fuel costs and all sorts of things. So they were even looking at, you know, if that was going to be feasible or really increasing what the participants who were riding in the vans were going to have to pay in terms of a copay. So we're very fortunate that we have our transit, but like I said, I really want to do more outreach to the rest of the county. We've been doing some small things, just marketing wise. We've joined a bunch of groups that are like, you know, what's happening in Menominee, but for the other areas. And I found one for, I think it was Boyceville. And I said, hey, would you mind advertising this group? You know, we're having this Stronger Bones exercise group. And the gal was so nice, but she's like, I've never heard of you. What are you? You know, and so I still hear that. And again, this was a younger woman who runs this group. You know, she's not probably of the age that she has ever had contact with the ADRC, but it's just such, you know, a struggle to still make sure that people know who we are. And then when I explained it to her, she's like, I will, absolutely. That's a wonderful group. You know, that's a wonderful organization. But it's just, you know, again, trying to get that word out there is what needs to happen.
I totally agree with that. And that was the one thing that, as you were talking about ADRC kind of funding or being the oversight around Strong Bones, I always thought it was Mayo
Mhm.
that did Strong Bones.
Well,
And you know, if to buy, you really want to get the buy-in from the larger county.
mhm.
And, you know, I just don't think that they just don't recognize ADRC's footprint on so many different
Right.
programs.
And that's what I'm trying to change. You know, I'm just trying to
Right.
really, and just so you know, Maria, so I'm not giving false information. Strong Bones is a federally recognized
Oh,
program that's an evidence-based health promotion program. So actually many, like UW Extension utilizes it, Mayo utilizes it. Casey, our gal who just went to full-time, is likely going to be trained on it, so we could offer it as well. But we're trying to, I don't want to duplicate services either.
right.
But Mayo, because of some changes in directions that they went, you know, eliminated that Strong Bones program. They're no longer offering that just because they don't have the staff in that department anymore that do that. So
Okay.
again, that was a very popular program, and
Right.
so it's possibly the time for us to jump in and pick up on offering that.
Mayo does do strong, we call it strong bodies at the
Right.
center, and they
Mhm.
do it. They facilitate it with their own staff.
Right, yep. So those programs aren't like owned by the ADRC.
Mhm.
It's just we do get some funding to be able to provide those programs.
Mhm.
But it's not been something, we tried to do some virtual programs like that during the pandemic, and those were largely very unsuccessful. And we've kind of struggled getting people to come back to in-person classes, but that's going to be the goal, is to really start getting that rolling again.
I just want to make one comment, which I know this is a cause that I believe in. Barron County and St. Croix County and other counties put money into a day program, a day respite program. And the one that's at the senior center is struggling. And I think that, you know, there needs to be some buy-in. You know, you've got some money available. And I think that the ADRC needs to have some buy-in into having some respite available in the community for people as they age, particularly those with dementia. And I'm not sure that the senior center is able to just be able to sustain that through grants and writing grants. And I think there needs to be buy-in from the ADRC and at some point. And other counties do buy into that and are supporting those programs in big ways. So I just want to put that plug in, and I know you know how I feel about that. And I just say, one of the things about people when they have dementia is the need to normalize their life so that they don't have necessarily somebody coming into the home and helping them with daily activities. They instead need to get out and be normalized, to have coffee with other people, to do some activities with other people, and make them feel that they're not as demented as they might be.
Mhm.
And anyway, I just want to push that too. So that's my soapbox.
I hear you, Margie. Yes, and I definitely will. I will just for the balance of the group to know, the way that we have attempted to support the program is that we do pay for people to participate and be in that program. We pay for some people to do it on a regular basis through that caregiver program. So if you know somebody who needs those services and they are interested in that for respite or for whatever the case may be, they just need to connect with us and they have to qualify for that program. But there are many folks that we pay for their participation in those adult programs that are at the senior center. So,
And the problem is, it's not paying is one of the issues, but the other is recruitment.
Right.
Because families are reluctant to allow somebody else and the person participating doesn't want to come, but once they come, they love it.
right.
And so that's the difference is the senior center doesn't have the time and energy or the staff to be able to go out and really visit families, and it needs to be your staff
Mhm.
that is actually selling the program.
And I will say we do on a very regular basis, and we share it on our Facebook because we are very invested on that program being successful. We do not want to
Yeah.
lose that program. I think it's a wonderful program and a wonderful partnership, but it also has to be financially feasible for the senior center to continue it. So yeah, we offer it many folks. Again, it's sometimes getting them to, like you said, Margie, they have to be willing to try. And it's scary for some people.
It's a marketing issue.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it really
Yep.
is. Okay.
And it's not just people with dementia, it's disabilities,
Right.
of all types.
Yep,
So
they have the two separate programs, the kind of the dad's program, the program for those with dementia, and then, yeah,
they have
They
now
kind of
just
merge.
been
That's right.
merged together.
yes.
And that's not
Right.
necessarily.
Yeah,
But
but, and that works. I believe that works. People are pretty accepting of each other once they're there. It's getting them there.
I got a question on, I assume that the buses would be more likely traveling to like where the libraries are,
I'm thinking, we'd have to figure out like a common place for people to meet.
right?
I was thinking of Colfax, maybe at the senior center at the Grapevine there, like just a common place for people to meet and then be brought back, after the shopping trip or the social trip, whatever we're able to figure out.
And then the other thing is, I was wondering how your success would change if, we made it real clear that, the senior member, aging member,
Mhm.
I would qualify for that, would be more, accepting of the program of, I'm not taking the car, I'm riding the bus. And it's just me.
Mhm.
That, is there a way to, like include, like your wingman would be, if you had a family member that would ride with you and say, let's go take a look at this. I know you're not very interested in just
Right.
jumping on the bus, but I'll go with you.
Right. I think that would definitely be an option, Larry, and something that we would want to encourage if it made people feel comfortable. So
Yeah.
we'll have to look at all those. And Austin is really kind of my expert in terms of the rules that go around like the ridership with the 8521 programming. But I believe that it's an adult with disabilities, an elder, and their care partner, like a guest can be with them as long as
Right.
they are there. Yeah.
I've had it, not just, one of those experiences in this last week where, my neighbor who's 95 called me up and says, Larry, are you going to the town board meeting that they're going to be talking about solar and stuff? I says, yeah, Don. I was but I hadn't heard about it and I knew it was coming up. Well, so 95-year-old guy calls me, asks if I'm going to go to the meeting, and I did. And he's there before me. And then I go to the meeting and see him and visit. And I screwed up. I should have says, Don, I'll pick you up. We'll both go to the meeting. But it was never, it just wasn't a mindset for the thing. And 95 years old. And when I was coming into the watershed conference this week on Thursday, after going to the meeting on Monday and not picking him up, the ambulance is there, and he had fallen down, and his son was there. And, he'd been on the kitchen floor for 3 hours and had the forehead and the nose and the chin bloody mark. And so you talk about something like this. Here's a guy that's 95 that drives to the town hall and comes back home at night. He probably doesn't think of himself as maybe, I think he thinks of himself as being 95, but not elderly. And, a guy like that, whatever it takes, should have a family member or a friend, get them involved in that riding. And it's like anything else, once you've, been somewhere with somebody, you're more comfortable going again.
Right.
So, boy, oh boy, life is something, ain't it? Tracy,
Yes.
thank you for
Well, I have one
doing
more
what
thing.
you do.
I have
Keep
one more
going.
thing to talk about. Okay, so the next thing, the 8521 trust fund update. So we've been talking about that 8521 transportation grant that we get every year. Typically, every year that the grant is spent in whole. We usually get around $114,000. Again, it pays for transportation that's provided through our transit system, and it's also pays for our volunteer driver program. We have some volunteer drivers that will take people to medical appointments in their own personal vehicles, and we do pay for mileage for those volunteer drivers. So, and typically it's always spent fully. During the epidemic, when folks were not leaving home and were not going places, and this was actually a little before my time, but the grant was not fully expended by the transit. And at that time, I don't even think we had a volunteer driver program because people were too afraid to get in other people's cars or give people rides. So the 8521 grant rules allow for counties to set up a trust fund where if you don't fully expend the grant, you can put a trust fund, and there are very specific rules on what you can spend that trust fund money in. When I first started with Dunn County, I wasn't aware that a trust fund had been set up. But when Paula Winter, our Department of Human Services director, started, she said, "Are you aware that we have an 8521 trust fund?" And I said, "No, Paula, I'm not. This is something I'm learning for the first time." So she said, yes, there were funds that went unspent during the COVID epidemic. They did everything correctly to set up that trust fund. And there was a balance of about $100,000 in that
Wow.
trust fund of unspent funds from the couple years. Also, I believe Austin in the transit area was able to get some ARPA funding during that period of time, the COVID relief money. So then he utilized that money, which was time sensitive rather than the $8521. So one of the rules with the $8521 is that you really are not supposed to have a balance. I mean, if possible, it's not ideal to have a trust fund, but if you have one, the state really asks that the balance be at $80,000 or less. And ours was over that. So Paula asked me for ways to, how can we spend this? I looked at the trust fund requirements, met with Austin. They're very specific, like you can use it for like a major repair, like an engine blowout. There are specific things that you can spend this money on. And he said, I don't have need for any of this right now. So we were kind of both putting our heads together, trying to think of ways that we could spend this money. Last July, we got a new set of guidelines from the Department of Transportation, which is where we receive those 8521 trust or grants from. And they indicated that we could spend the money on a transportation vehicle for a county-owned nursing home. So I called our contact with the Department of Transportation. Her name is Lori. She's wonderful. I said, "Lori, am I dreaming? Am I looking, what am I seeing here? I've never seen this before. What is this all about? And she said, yep, there's been a reinterpretation of the law of the ruling. In the past, we've never been able to use money for that because nursing homes are funded by separate federal dollars. And, there were all these things, but there has been a reinterpretation. And if it's a nonprofit or government owned, medical facility, it could be an assisted living or a nursing home, you are able to help or buy entirely a transportation vehicle for them because they're obviously providing transportation to people in your community that meet the adults with disabilities or elder population. So I was very excited and I connected with Paula Winter and Chris Corpola because obviously I knew that the neighbors had been fundraising for many years for a resident transportation vehicle. They were very excited about this potential use of funds, and we connected with Carmen at the Neighbors, who was very thrilled. So basically, what I'm telling you is that the ADRC 8521 money, about $50,000 of that went to the Neighbors bus, which is why they were able to actually complete that and get that bus. And the reason that I'm letting you know this is because they have publicly thanked the ADRC. It wasn't necessarily something, I mean, I guess Paula said, why didn't you tell that committee? That's wonderful news. And, but it was just not, there was a lot of other things going on. And so I didn't report that, but they're having a celebration of getting the bus this afternoon, which I'll be popping over, but you'll see that they thanked the ADRC. And again, I mean, I just think it's a wonderful use of that money. I was under pressure to spend some of those funds down. They themselves did a wonderful job of fundraising. They raised like 75,000. So the bulk still came from their fundraising, but obviously I think it was $50,212 or something that, and we did, whenever you're using that trust fund money, you actually have to go to the Department of Transportation and let them know what your request is and they have to approve it, and they approved it. And so and again, I think the alternative was, I think that the Neighbors was actually looking at, well, it probably would have been another couple of years of fundraising or going to the county board and asking, for funding, and the Neighbors struggle sometimes with funding. And so I'm hoping that this prevented many more years of fundraising and using the bus that really was on its last legs, or asking for tax levy, which of course is always a tough ask for something like that. So I'm excited, and they have their new bus, and it's just really wonderful way to
great
utilize
news.
that. Yeah.
And I believe, as I recall, they took their first jaunt around the neighborhood in the bus today.
Wonderful. That's exciting.
Great.
And they'll be coming to the senior center on Wednesday for our meal with a group of people.
Yes. So anyway, that I thought, I can't believe I didn't actually mention that before, but this is all just kind of, we got permission in February from the Department of Transportation to use those funds. So I guess actually we haven't met since then because our last meeting was in January, but I thought you'd all be interested. And if you happen to read what the Neighbors is putting out there, so you know why they're thanking the ADRC, it's because of that. So that was good news.
Yeah, I guess, because I mean, I read about the new bus project and I thought, God, I still thought they had I don't keep track of how much money they have, but I know how hard they work for what they've gotten.
Mhm.
Wow.
And that, Larry, now is actually all that I have for my report for today. So,
Well, your stuff sort of like makes a difference, and mine's are just stories.
What about an update on the other funding that came through last summer?
the ILSP
Yeah.
project.
Is that going fairly well?
It is going, Margie. I mean, there's definitely bumps in the road. It's not going as smoothly as I would like, but that's kind of what you sign up for when you sign up for a pilot project. So for those, that's that independent living support pilot project. We are having success with people actually being able to use some of their funding. There've been a number of kind of complications just in terms of, it sounds so foolish, but when we were just talking before this meeting about how I depend on my IT people, the computer systems that the state that we needed for the program were really not ready to go until later, and have continually continued to have some glitches that have really caused some headaches. So that has slowed some things down. And as a matter of fact, there was a period of time where we kind of had to stop for a little bit until things got up and running again. And I know when you sign up for a pilot project, that's what you're signing up for. But we're hearing really neat stories. There was a gentleman on the eastern side of the state that has some very, very significant physical disabilities and had been fundraising on his own for quite some time to get a service animal, and was able to enroll in the ILSP program and was able to use his $7,200 in funding to get that support animal. So he's actually in Florida right now doing like extensive, like this is a dog that can open doors and answer door. I mean, it's a very highly specifically trained dog. So, just some really neat stories, lots of stories of people that, were feeling unsafe in their homes because they could no longer navigate stairs, and stair lifts have been put in, or ramps to get in and out of their home. Things that even if the program doesn't continue, these are things that will outlast the program in terms of things that are keeping folks safe in their homes. So even though sometimes I get frustrated and I want to pull my hair out because I just think, oh my gosh, another conundrum. When you hear those success stories and you have people that are thanking you, it does feel really good. So that again is set to sunset a year from now, March of 2025. And we still continue to keep statistics and do reports. And we have both UW-Madison researcher involved in that program, as well as there's members of Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the federal level that are part of all of our meetings that are studying the project. So there's hope that it'll be something that continues, but we won't really know. As I had explained before, they're using some leftover ARPA funds or those COVID relief funds for that program. So, yeah.
The other questions or discussions? I was just looking here at the agenda that I'm supposed to be following, and I guess right in here was someplace I should talk about next meeting. And I'm not going to ask Tracy to come up with another $100,000 by the time we meet in March.
Okay. Thanks, Larry. I appreciate that.
Okay, I want you to know that I'm expect a lot, but you've already done something great in making
Thank
that
you.
happen. Because
Well, and again, I think that it's a wonderful, it fits the purpose of that grant very well in
Yeah,
terms
it's
of
amazing, isn't
providing
it?
access to transportation access for social activities or medical. I mean, the neighbors uses it typically for transportation for socialization and social activities. But I do remember from working there, occasionally there would be some sort of snafu where transportation, there was a mix up and they didn't get somebody from an appointment, and one of the staff were taking the bus and going to pick those folks up for
Perfect.
medical appointments too. So I just think it was a wonderful coming together of circumstances where we happened to have this money that we had to spend down, and the federal government looked at the rules a little bit differently and made an allowance for that. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Well, if you made a list of all the things that came out of COVID that you had to deal with, let's consider this something that helped Dunn County to do it, make it available. And you see, the thing is, without the healthcare center having worked as hard as they had to have that fund up there, they put in the sweat and
Hours and yeah.
how many different fundraisers did they have? Or
Oh, they were fundraising when I was still working over there, and that's
Yeah.
going on 3 years ago. We were, doing fundraising then. So,
yeah, well, so we're going to meet also with Bernie then and the nutrition committee,
yes.
and we'll be able to get an update from him on where he's at with his new stuff.
So when is the next meeting?
The next meeting is going to be in May 20th at 1:00. And now, because I've always got just one more story, are you guys familiar how corn planters work and how they have evolved? Because Luke is at a corn planter meeting today. So when I started farming and with my dad, everybody had a 2-row corn planter, and it's had a marker that would go down. So every row of corn was 40 inches apart. And the 40 inches apart number came from, that was the width of a horse from the time when they worked horses and the horses walked down between the rows. So then when you got to be a really better farmer and had paid for that 2-row planter, they went to a 4-row planter, and that lasted quite a while. And then if you really made it big, you had a 6-row planter, and now the harvesting equipment and the tillage and everything accomplished a 6-row planter, but now the rows were down to 30 inches apart from 40. So Luke's at a meeting today about corn planters. Now I see corn planters and I can't even count the number of rows they have because they're sold by how wide they are. So think of your driveways and think of going through gates and thinking of, turn it around, so you end up with a 6-row corn planter about like this. Now they sell corn planters that they must be 25 or 30 rows, aren't they, Dave, with those 15 inches and stuff? Anyway, they're like this wide. So now how do you get this wide up and down the road, and how does you get it into your field? Well, the first technology was the drop where you hook up, slid back, and the rows tipped over like that, and they come together behind the tractor. Now with those, I think they're 100 feet wide, some of them. I see them in shops, guys working on them, and to count it, be goofy. So now you've got this machine that's this wide, and the whole thing lifts up and turns, and that's how you travel down the road and get from here to there. Of course, to be able to have that much fun with your tractor and corn planter, you would have probably $250,000 invested in the tractor, the corn planter, and the little 2-row planter probably cost 50. So, okay.
Can I bring up something else?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to corn planting.
Okay.
I don't know anything about it. I went with Tracy and there's a couple of us went to an advocacy meeting last year, I think it was, or something, where they were talking about advocate, and I'm on the mailing list to get advocacy information and updates on things on advocacy dealing with disabilities and aging issues. And one of the things that I just got an email this last week dealt with the issue of power of attorney for health cares. And one of the issues is that the state legislature is in the process of considering passing this bill. And I'm bringing it up because I think we need to be aware of it, whether as an issue. It is that if people do not have a power of attorney for healthcare and they go into the hospital, then the hospital will appoint someone to be that power of attorney for healthcare. And I think I that's a concern to me, because you may not even know that whoever is appointed to be this power of attorney for healthcare, but the hospital and the doctor are saying this person can't make the decisions themselves. They need somebody to make these decisions for them. And I think we as in this community and the ADRC really need to be pushing the issue of getting power of attorney for healthcare and getting everybody to sign something so that there is something in place. And I'm sure you do that, but
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that, Margie. I've been following that closely. The power of attorney for healthcare and finance are a passion project of mine. It has been for a long time because most people don't realize that the state of Wisconsin is one of only 7 states in the country that is not a next of kin state. So that means that if you don't have those legal documents in place, and you are in need of somebody to make your medical decisions for you, legally at a hospital setting in an emergency, they are not supposed to tell, they're not supposed to go to your spouse or if you're a parent of an adult child, they are not supposed to do that. They're supposed to do everything they can to save the person's life, put them on a machine, and then let the person go through the court system for guardianship in order for a guardian to then make that decision. So what Margie is speaking to is the American Hospital Association Wisconsin chapter, as well as the American Medical Association Wisconsin chapter, made a strong lobbying push to say, this is a problem in Wisconsin because we're having people stuck in the hospital systems. Because not only does that mean that you can't make decisions for somebody, it means that they can't be admitted to a nursing home, like discharged from the hospital. There's nobody there to sign paperwork, all that sort of thing. And it really does, I understand where the hospital systems are coming from because it causes a huge clog where people are stuck in a hospital bed that they don't really need, because there's nobody that legally who can make these decisions for them to move them on to the next, assisted living or nursing home. But that still doesn't mean that the best system is just to say, oh, the hospital is just going to decide who makes decisions for this person. So I do have an update in that the state legislature has opted not to hear that. So it is dead for now. It's not going to committee. It's none of that. And that the board, Wisconsin Board for those with people with disabilities was very much not wanting that legislation to move forward. That doesn't mean it won't come around again. And, the medical associations and the hospital associations are very, very powerful lobbies. And this, again, causes a lot of problems in the hospital system. And I do understand definitely where they're coming from. It's very difficult. And especially, I'm going to be honest with you folks, now that we're going to have quite a shortage of hospital beds in our area, it also doesn't feel right to have somebody taking up a hospital bed that doesn't need it. And then we're going to ship the person who needs a hospital bed to Green Bay or the cities or whatever, because that's what's available. So we are huge, huge, huge proponents of people getting their powers of attorney for healthcare and finance. Prior to my time, our Corp Council had actually made a determination in Dunn County that they did not want county staff to be witnesses for powers of attorney for healthcare or notaries. I did some advocacy work with our Corp Council this last year, and they've actually made a different determination. So just the folks in the ADRC, Denise is our notary, myself, and the other workers the INA workers are now allowed to witness and help people complete their powers of attorney for healthcare and finance. So it's definitely something that I am very passionate about. I even tell people, if your child is my oldest son is 19 years old. When he was 18, we sat down with him and he completed those documents, because I have seen on the other side of the coin situations where people are just waiting in a hospital setting when they need to go to rehab, and all those sorts of things that happen. So I don't think we've seen the last of potential legislation that will change the rules in Wisconsin. And I'm not even saying that it might not be appropriate for there to be some change. Like I said, Wisconsin is only one of 7 states in the country that don't have some form of next of kin legislation that does allow people to make decisions. The way that it apparently was written for this attempt, I did not agree with, but I think that there could be looking at some other states that are successful with this as examples to see maybe some different appropriate ways that could happen. But for now, if you are a citizen of the state of Wisconsin, powers of attorney for healthcare and finance are the way that your voice can be heard in terms of who you want to make decisions for you if you are unable to make decisions for yourself. And at the ADRC will help you complete those documents for free. So like I said, whenever I have an intern working with me, it's something that I, talk with them about. The college interns, most of them have no idea that that's the case. I mean, most people have no idea that that's the case. Most people think, oh, I'm married, my spouse will be able to make those decisions. That is actually not true. So I always say, completing those documents, even though most people don't like thinking about it, it's just like people don't like thinking about doing their wills, but it's a gift to yourself because you are getting to have your voice heard about who you want to help make those decisions if you need it. It's a gift to your loved ones because in the situation where somebody is not able to make their own medical decisions, it's usually because of a very negative medical event and they're already stressed out. And then to be told by someone at the hospital, well, now you need to go hire an attorney, you have to call the county and they have to help you go through the guardianship process and you have to show up in court and all this business is one extra stress that they don't need at that point. And selfishly, it's a gift to the county because counties oftentimes get involved in guardianships, and they are very, very expensive and time consuming for counties to have. When in Dunn County, we have a threshold. People's assets have to be spent down to about $5,000 in order for the county to take on a guardianship case. There are some flexibilities to that. There are circumstances that, we don't know the finances or we can't find that out quickly. So we end up taking on a case, but that's the general. Above and beyond that, then folks have to, retain their own attorney to do that guardianship piece, but.
Well, thank you for the update. And I just think sometimes it's easy to not know what's going on at the state legislature. And sometimes decisions are made that may have some negative effect on people in our own county or on ourselves. And so keeping aware of those kind of things is important.
And like I
Thank you.
said, Margie, I don't think this will be the last time we see something like this because from the healthcare side, it's very much a concern. So.
And then I experienced in the cities that someone who was like a second mom to me, she had no other family. And I call it the garden hose, but they put that in when they hauled her to the hospital and she didn't want that. And I went there, but you better carry that power of attorney with you on your person because the hospital couldn't find it. So I think that's.
Take it when you travel.
Yeah, whatever. I think you have to have it with.
And that's when someone meets with us to do those documents, we kind of explain to them too what you should do with it. You should give a copy to the person that would be your agent. You should bring it to your next doctor's appointment to have it scanned in the system, where you should have that so it's accessible should it be needed. So.
Well, I'm glad we didn't end on corn planters.
That was interesting.
That was.
Absolutely, Dave. Yep. And I typically am the lead. I'm the most comfortable with the powers of attorney for healthcare because that is in the nursing home side, that's actually a federal requirement that nursing home social workers have to be able to do those. So even though Dunn County had kind of a rule for the Department of Human Services staff, I have done powers of attorney for years and years. So I'm usually, Dave, if you know somebody who wants an appointment, they can just call and say they want to make an appointment to do a power of attorney for healthcare, or they could ask for me. So. Right. And it's something actually we did for a wellness activity for county employees. I actually offered that and we had some takers. We're actually planning to do more where I'm going to try to be meeting with like each county department and just sharing that information with them. Most folks aren't ready right at that moment to fill out the documents, but I can at least give them that same spiel I gave to you because again, I would guess 90% of those folks have no idea that if they don't have those documents in place, what it means. But then I give them the documents and then they can set up an appointment to come in and finish those with me.
You can do them yourself too.
Yeah, you can. You don't
Go
yeah,
in and get the
yep.
information and then you can sit down.
Yep. And you just need for the power of attorney for healthcare, you need 2 unrelated witnesses. So it can be your neighbors. And for the power of attorney for finance, you just need 1 notary to witness your signature. But sometimes people like to talk it up through with folks that have a little bit of knowledge too. So.
But at least for the health on the healthcare side, you would think that Mayo Clinic and Marshfield and I mean, any of the healthcare systems would really be asking
And-
patients.
And they do have, like, they actually now have some new positions with social workers, like that's going to be their
Yeah.
only job. And they're gonna be doing some more, what they call clinics, but like open hours for people to come in just to be doing powers of attorney for healthcare. It is supposed to be on a screening that they do with everyone's annual physical to ask if they have that. But I think what happens is people might say, oh yeah, I think so, or, oh, yeah, we're working on that, and it's just kind of dropped. So, or maybe they're missing that question too, but it definitely benefits the health systems if people have that in place.
Right.
Well, they always ask me, do we have one on file? And I say, I think you do, but I don't.
They should be able to check.
See,
Get a copy and take it into your documents.
I guess so. Well, anything else? I just can't believe the knowledge this committee shares. It's just fantastic. And you have to have. But you know, if I don't,
Yes.
you know, if I might just skip next meeting just so you guys can ask Luke about corn planters.
Well, you know what? I was thinking as you were relating that story about 100 feet wide is imagine if there were horses
Yeah.
instead of,
Yeah.
pulling that.
Yeah, well,
How many horses that would
I was at
take?
Withy this morning and on the side of, on the road sign, it had a picture of a buggy, Amish buggy, and it says expect Amish next 26 miles. And, those shoulders are rock hard and flat. And, it's just amazing. And, you talk about the healthcare stuff and, the powers of attorneys. I think those folks, get by with, I don't know, about the same as what they have, and, can you imagine, you know, uh, how difficult it would be when we feel that we have a chance for the information, they're not getting it, I don't think, I would think not, but. Okay, yeah,
I-
how many horses?
Can I, I was raised on a dairy farm near Menominee, and I remember when my father changed the hitches from horse-drawn to tractor-drawn, and I watched him do that. But we had a big Dick and Dan, really big horses for years, and I distinctly remember when he did that.
Yeah, and those rows were 40 inches apart because that's what a team could go down, or a single horse. And, anything from, Dave? I mean, giving you a chance here to two cents on anything. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you very much. We'll call the meeting adjourned and we'll see you in May 20th, 1:00. Thank you.